Hi, my name is Brittany and I make snails. And today's snails are going to be a little bit different than the others I've made in that I need to give you a little bit of a content warning ahead of time for these guys. Well, really just for one of them in particular, but overall we're dealing with the Hannibal TV show. So of course Hannibal the cannibal who murders and consumes people. So if if you clicked on this video on accident or you're not interested in seeing a small amount of snail gore, then it's fine if you don't watch it. I really liked how the Breaking Bad snails turned out in my last video, which you should check out if you haven't already watched it, and I wanted to keep that sort of style going. So I've made this template for the face shape and size so that I can keep that more consistent from snail to snail, which will help me keep my overall snail scale consistent as well. So I'm going to pretty much make this in a very similar way that I did with the Breaking Bad snails, where I'm going to entirely make their faces first because I really think that worked out well, having the face totally how I want it, as much of that likeness as I can possibly capture, and then baking it to kind of lock that in before attaching it and sculpting it with the body, which I'm kind of getting ahead of myself there because I'm going to do that in this video too. And before I do that, I will have to actually make the faces. So I'm going to look at some beautiful pictures of Mads from the TV show, and I'm going to do my best to try and capture all of the unique little details in his facial features that make him so uniquely himself. I am actually making 3 snails in this set. So there is a Hannibal snail, a Will Graham, and a Cassie Boyle, who is Hannibal's first victim that we see in the show. And I'll talk a little bit more about her when I get to her. But you might be wondering why I am bothering to sculpt eyes when he's going to have snail eyes, of course, just like all of the snails. But I found that it really helps me to make sure that I have all of my proportions as close as I can get them. It's just an extra sort of reference point for my eyeballs to measure distances by and make adjustments by. So here's Matt's cute little face. And then, of course, I also made Will's face and Cassie's face too, but she's kind of a special case because... And if you haven't seen the show already, spoilers, but also you should definitely go watch it because it's great. But I wanted to make her in the way that she is sort of presented to Will by Hannibal at the beginning of the show. And she's dead. And her body is positioned on a taxidermy deer head. So I need to make a tiny taxidermy snail deer head. And it also needs to be able to support the weight of a snail body being positioned on it, which, luckily snail bodies aren't particularly heavy, but I'd rather over-engineer than under-engineer, and it's good to have a support system within the antlers anyway, because otherwise they'd be really thin and spindly and more likely to break themselves if it were to ever take a tumble or anything. So I've drawn out where I want the antlers to kind of be while looking at a reference image from the show. And I'm going to painstakingly bend this wire to create a support system that runs throughout the entirety of the antlers, using that little doodle I made as a reference point and a template to come back and check and tweak and adjust until it is the shape that I need it to be. But I'll be honest, working with wire is not my favorite thing. I find it very annoying and pokey and frustrating, but sometimes you just got to use it. Sometimes it's the best thing for the job. So I made 2 of these antlers, checking back to my little reference template and kind of tweaking and adjusting things. And they don't have to be exactly perfectly identical because, they're not that way in real life. But they're pretty close. They're pretty close. Same basic shape. So my first priority with the deer head is going to be getting those antlers locked in place so that I can have my support there to kind of build from. But I am going to kind of plan out some details of like eyes, nose, and mouth, because the ears are going to also be included in that because they also need a little bit of a support, because I wasn't quite sure if they were going to fully contact the surface of the antlers once this was done or not, so I figured better to just be on the safe side and give it a support just in case. Even if it doesn't need it, it's fine. You can never be too supported, as long as it doesn't, bulk up your finished piece too much, at least in my opinion. That's just how I look at it. But anyway, so I baked that and locked those antlers in. Now I can kind of pinch and pull them a little bit more because they're securely in place, and I can fine tune and tweak exactly how they line up to hopefully very comfortably fit Miss Cassie Boyle, in their gentle cradle. Well, maybe not so gentle, very pokey. A lot of poking. A little bit of snail blood. Did you know snail blood's blue? Anyway, we'll talk about that later. These are the shells that I picked for Will and Hannibal. I wanted to use shells that were similar to each other but not identical, so we're going with these cone-shaped shells for these guys, and here's their faces. And you guys have seen me make snail bodies before, right? You watched the Breaking Bad video, you know. If not, you can go back and watch that one and then you'll see. But I attached their heads to their bodies, and I decided that I didn't like Will's face. It took me a minute to realize who he reminded me of, but he's very Chevy Chase as Voldemort. So that couldn't be left that way. He had to get some face work done. So I also added eye stalks and some body texture, and then they got fully baked. And now they're ready for their eye stalks. And this is of course going to be the same way as I usually do it as well. A little bit of clay adhesive in between that raw and unbaked clay, and then I'm going to sculpt the eyes. Now, since I'm making 3 snails for this set, I couldn't possibly show you every part of making all 3 of those snails, because that would just be repetitive and kind of unnecessary, and this video would be way longer than anyone wants to watch. So just know that as this is going on, I am also sculpting Cassie Boyle's body as I'm sculpting theirs, and I'm also adding details and textures to the deer head as I'm also texturing and working on these snails. So here's where our deer head is at now. Like I said, added texture, have Cassie's body pretty much the way that I want it, made sure that it fits. I have not yet attached the shell to her body because I need to make sure that it fits, and I wasn't sure if I was going to be able to still have any flexibility with the antlers to be able to kind of squeeze that in there or not. So just to be safe, I left the shell unattached. As I'm painting her body, I'm leaving a bare place for that shell attachment to happen because I don't want to attach the clay to the paint. I don't want anything in between those 2 layers obstructing it. So once the paint was dry, clay adhesive, stuck the shell on, made sure that it was going to fit the way that I wanted. I did the painting first because I was worried about getting up into the cavity, like between the antlers and stuff. This was such a weird thing to make. This was way more complicated than I thought it was going to be, but it ended up working out okay. So, maybe some things I could have done better, but that's also just part of learning. And, maybe the next time I make a snail who's impaled on a deer head, I'll be able to do it even better. But now it's time to actually attach her to that deer head and create those wounds. So just like always, I'm putting that clay adhesive in between the raw and baked clay, and then smoothing that down, making sure that it kind of goes around the antler tips where I need it to. And at this point I did finally decide to actually make the deer head a snail as well, with a little taxidermy deer snail eye. And while she's in the oven, I needed to clothe the boys. So, same deal. Clay adhesive, clay. I filled in this kind of cavity that they both had in their sort of, I guess it'd be somewhat analogous to like a chest. It's all just the foot of the snail, but, approximately where a human chest would be, where the clothes are going to mostly fall. Filled in that cavity, and then with the clay adhesive in between, I'm going to make a little sheet of clay that I can use as the fabric kind of base for my, he's wearing like a loose jacket kind of in this scene. I kind of base the whole look of their outfits and everything around the specific scene in the first episode where Cassie Boyle is discovered, and it kind of shows, Will coming and seeing Cassie's body and taking a look and realizing that, this is a copycat, and then we cut to, you know, Hannibal in his little suit eating her lungs that he harvested. So all the outfits are based on the way that they look in that scene. I had originally planned on including Will Graham's glasses because that's such an iconic thing. But he doesn't wear them in that scene, so I opted to leave it off. But anyway, so made his little shirt with his little buttons and his little jacket. For the jackets, I've made quite a few of them at this point. I usually just make kind of that, you know, rectangular wrap around for like the base shape, and then I'll add on top of that any, you know, lapels or, oh, dog hair, any lapels or like the collar, any pockets or, you know, details after that. I kind of like everything with the snails, really. I kind of build it from the base up, you know, kind of from a more general to a more specific. And here's Hannibal. He's already got his little shirt and jacket, but he of course needed his tie because he's all dressed up for his delicious lung dinner. Lungs sound so gross. Do people actually eat lungs and things? I have no idea. Like, I know people eat all kinds of different, like, animal parts and things, which is, you know, not my favorite, but are lungs a thing? Is there any animal lungs that are eaten? There probably is, right? Surely. That's probably based off of something. Anyways, their clothes got baked, and now they need hair. And if you sneak a peek in the corner there, Hannibal's hair is already done at this point. Cassie's hair is also already done at this point. But I opted to to show Will's hair because I thought it kind of had the most shapeliness to it. I kind of built up those kind of basic shapes and then add more defined detail and definition as I go. Here's a quick look at Hannibal's hair up close before they both go in the oven for the final bake for this snail set. And now that everyone is baked, I can start with the painting. So I'm going to do a kind of base layer first of the general colors that I want, this kind of gradient for the body, and then the skin tone as well as the clothes. Everything will get kind of just a base layer, and then after that's dry, I will build it up with more detail painting and different color variations and blends and things until I get things as close to the way that I want it as I can. Details on the shirt, highlighting some of the fur on the deer's head. And now for Cassie, she gets the honor of being a little bit bloody. Now, I've made snails in the past that involve blood, but I always just kind of decided to err on the side of, you know, more humanistic blood. But I am trying to be more accurate to snail anatomy and more kind of realistic overall. So this is the first time that I'm making blue snail blood, but they have a copper-based blood circulatory system as opposed to our iron-based one, and so their blood looks blue. It's pretty crazy, actually. But yeah, so that was fun. Now that all the painting's done, I can seal everyone with some water-based polyacrylic. This will just help to kind of give everything a uniform smoothness, make everything look real shiny and slimy, and also protect all of those paints that I worked so hard to put in from getting scratched off or rubbed off over time. Now I also decided that for Cassie's stand deer head thing, there's like rocks that are piled against the bottom of it. I wanted to make that a little mossy, so I have this dried out like craft moss that I have pureed into a fine powder that I'm going to then mix with a little bit of that same polyacrylic to make kind of a goopy, sludgy, mossy goop. And then I'm going to just kind of slap it on willy-nilly where I think it would look nice in all those little cracks and crevices in the rocks, just to, you know, just to add a little bit of greenery to an otherwise very dreary sort of scene with poor Cassie. And then after that, there's really only one thing left to do, but besides wait for them to fully dry before this, but they need a few little UV resin details. I'm going to use a little dollop of UV resin to dome each one of their little snail eyes, with the exception of Cassie, just because, you know. And then I'm going to use some pearlescent mica powder with a little bit of UV resin to make their slime trails, which will go on kind of their like neck sort of area, as well as the bottom of their foot, their snail foot. I just kind of pour it on there and smooth it out, and then stick it on this silicone mat. That way it is not going to stick. Once it's cured, I can easily remove it, and I can also use that surface to make sure I get a nice smooth flat bottom. And I can kind of add a little bit of UV resin here and there to refine the shape of the slime to a certain degree. You know, it's still slimy. It's going to be a little messy. And then once everybody's totally cured, that is it. They're done. They're ready. Here is Will in all his sad boy glory. I really like how he turned out. I think that my facelift that I gave him was definitely the right choice. But I don't know. I'm happy with it. I really like how it came out. I think I was a little bit worried with doing more snails like the Breaking Bad snails that were wearing clothes that weren't just like a hazmat suit. I opted to not give them pants, which in the past I've always given snails pants. But I think it worked out really well with just having the jacket and shirt. But I mean, who knows? Snails in the future might wear some pants again. But I think the likeness is pretty good. I think it's definitely I'm definitely moving in the right direction. And I know that with more time and with working at it more, the likeness will probably get better. I definitely have seen a lot of improvement in my own work over the last few years since I started making the snails, which is kind of crazy because I never notice the changes like as they're happening in real time. But there are changes there. There is definitely growth there. And I definitely learned a lot from making Cassie here because, this was a way more complicated pose than I kind of originally anticipated, and maybe that's because I overthought it and over-engineered it a little bit, but I definitely think if I were to make her again, there were some things that I would have done a little bit differently, some things where I, kind of got the order of operations a little bit mixed up, but that's okay too. That's part of the learning process. I'll definitely keep it in mind for any weird future murder victims that I make from other shows and things, because, that'll inevitably happen at some point. Halloween will be coming in a few months, and I'm a pretty big horror person, so who knows where the future thinkings of my brain might take me. Oh, and I was going to mention earlier, but the clip went by so fast. For Hannibal and Will's shells, I chose these cone-shaped shells because I was thinking about the assassin snails that you put in like a fish tank to control certain like unwanted snail species, and they have very cone-shaped shells. They cannibalize and eat the other snails, so I wanted this specific shape, and then I liked that Hannibal's was kind of more pointed and then Will's has this kind of more roundness to it while still being similar. I thought that was kind of related to their kind of interactions in the show, in the books, in the movies. But yeah, I think they turned out really great. I really like this set. I really hope that you guys enjoyed hanging out and listening to me ramble about making them. And let me know what snails you'd like to see in the future, especially any gory, spooky snails you might like to see. I'll get crazy. I'll get as crazy as you guys want with the gore. Just let me know. But the blood will be blue. Just keep that in mind, which might be good for YouTube, actually. But yeah, thanks so much for watching. You guys are awesome, and I will see you in the next video.